everybody. I'm Barbara Amstutz, President of the Central Delaware County League of Women Voters. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the candidate forum for the Pennsylvania Senate District 26 with Tom McGarrigle and Tim Carney. This event is sponsored by the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the Delaware County Chamber of Commerce. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan civic organization. We do not tell you who and what party to vote for or who to support. We do want you to know about the issues facing your community and provide you the resources to help you make informed, thoughtful choices. The mission of the League is to encourage knowledgeable and active participation in government, to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. Before voting, we encourage you to think about the issues which are most important to you and to find out about each candidate's position, to consider the leadership qualities you look for in a leader and who possesses those qualities. Our goal is to inform you directly from the candidates themselves regarding the public policy issues that have the greatest impact in your community. Decide, encourage your friends to vote, and vote on Tuesday, November 6th. In the spirit of nonpartisanship, we request your compliance with the League standards of conduct for candidate forums. Please turn off your cell phones. No cameras, please. No applause during the event. No signs in the room. No campaign shirts. No political flyers or handouts. Be respectful to others in speech and behavior. This forum is being professionally videotaped. However, please no filming or use of any video from this event in partisan advertising. Mary Jo Gilsdorf will serve as our moderator. Mary Jo. She will review the debate format, the procedure for questions that we have received from the audience via cards, the role of the timekeeper, and timing of the candidate responses and rebuttals. Welcome tonight. We're sure to have a fascinating evening. Thank you for coming. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Mary Jo Gilsdorf.
First of all, I want to thank everyone and welcome everyone to this event. My name is Mary Jo Gilsdorf, and I am the League's moderator for this forum of Pennsylvania Senatorial District 26. Our two candidates in alphabetical order are Tim Carney and Tom McGarrigle. I will refer to the candidates as Mr. Carney and Mr. McGarrigle. This is the format for this evening's forum. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to make an opening statement. The candidates have met beforehand and have agreed that Mr. McGarrigle will begin, then Mr. Carney, and so on in rotating fashion throughout the evening. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to respond to questions put to them by the audience, and we have a lot of questions this evening, and that's great, that's wonderful. League members will hold up a yellow card at the 20-second mark. A red card means stop. We ask the candidates to adhere to the time format, but if a red card goes up in the middle of the sentence, please finish your sentence, and then the candidate has a choice of using one of 4 bonus cards for 30 seconds additional time. Candidates, after you use a bonus card, please put it into the basket or in the middle of the table as the basket's in. Thank you. The forum has been planned to allow for 16 audience questions. I know we've gotten a lot more than that. All the questions have been reviewed and categorized as to topic. I have a good stack of them here. If during the forum you want to add another question, raise your hand and a League member will bring a card to you, card to the person at the end of your row to pass it down to you so you can write down your question and then pass it back and they will bring it forward. All of the questions will be picked up and the League members review the questions before they are submitted to the candidates. There are multiple questions about the same subject, and so they have been organized, and we will be going through them one by one. Please ask questions of general interest to the audience. Each candidate will have a chance to answer each question and take a minute and a half to do so. Candidates will not bring notes to the forum. However, the League has provided tablets to take notes during the event. Finally, and once again, please check and see if your cell phone and any other recording devices, except for the professional videographer, have been turned off. No filming is allowed. The League will post the video of this forum on their website, which is lwbcdc.org. If you Google the League of Women Voters in Delaware County, and on YouTube. Okay? And again, I just reiterate. No applause during the forum. It will simply slow things down, and we won't get a chance to get to as many questions as possible. All right, and with this, I invite Mr. McGarrigle to present his opening statement.
Thank you. First of all, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming and being part of this debate process. I hope you find it very, very interesting. First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and Springfield Township for allowing us to use their facility to have this event. If you look in the piano over there, there's a binder with probably 100 or 200 pages of legislation that I've either authored, co-sponsored, or supported that was passed through the Pennsylvania Senate on a with bipartisan support by both Democrats and Republicans, and most of it signed into law by a Democratic governor, Tom Wolf. Why is that important? It's important because with all the chaos in government today, it shows that I have the ability to reach across the aisle and work with the other side of the aisle to do what's best for the 26th district and what's best for Pennsylvania. And there's a couple things I'd like to highlight that I've accomplished in my first 4 years in the Senate. One was we licensed recovery homes. First time in the history, recovery homes are licensed. What does that do? In this terrible opioid crisis, right now, the Pennsylvania will be able to inspect and make sure that the people that are in treatment have the right treatment, and they're going along with the recovery in the right way. What else did we do? Historic domestic abuse bills. We took guns away from domestic abusers. I'm done. I'll start. The film guy got more time than me.
Mr. Carney to present his opening statement.
Thank you, Mary Jo. First, thank you to the League of Women Voters and for the NAACP for hosting this forum. And thank you all of you for coming out on school night to participate in our democracy. My name is Tim Carney. I am an architect. I am a small business owner. I am a citizen mayor. I'm an educator as well. I'm a citizen mayor because I don't get paid for being there. My wife, Claudia, and I moved to Swarthmore and raised our family there. My kids, who are now young adults, and we have been involved in our community since they were small. As an architect, I work all the time with teams of disparate persons, different kinds of people, in order to accomplish things and actually build things from the ground up. My background is such that we work together, we coordinate, we consult with each other in order to get to a goal and actually finish things and make things happen. And if we don't make things happen, if we don't please the homeowner or the university that we're doing the work for, then we don't get paid. That doesn't happen in Harrisburg. In Harrisburg, pretty much everyone gets paid, no matter what, how much stuff gets done. We need to change that. Right now in the state Senate, for example, there are 4 oil and gas lobbyists for every member of the Senate. I am running in order to try to.
All right, let's begin with our first question. And if either of the candidates ever want me to repeat a question or don't understand what I've just read, please just ask and I'll repeat it. The first question, for both candidates, what will you do to reform Pennsylvania state government so that we are no longer ranked near the bottom in terms of best practices. Campaign finance reforms, size of the House, number of state employees, etc., no receipt of reimbursements, number of voting days, etc. Mr. McGarrigle?
Well, there was a bill in the House to lower the number of members in the House, and it was passed once, but this year it was not passed. I would support that. I think that the House and probably the Senate is too large. It's one of the largest in the country, and sometimes there's too many members to get a consensus and get things done. But we've downsized government. Today, the Pennsylvania government probably has 8,000 to 10,000 less employees than it had 5 years ago. And we continue to look for ways to improve it. We need to work a lot harder. I proposed a shale tax when I ran for the Senate 4 years ago. I was able to get it passed the Senate. The House could not move it. And the shale tax, we believe, could generate up to $1 billion in extra revenue for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We need to constantly look for ways to improve government. And I agree with you. Government is not easy. There's too many roadblocks. And that's why I got involved. As a township commissioner and as a county councilman and now as a senator. I get calls all the time. We get calls because there's roadblocks in government, and we need to remove those roadblocks and make it easier for the average citizen to get things done, not only at a local level or a county level, but at a state level. And we need to continue to look for ways to improve, put efficiencies into government, and we've been doing that, and we will continue to do that in Harrisburg.
Mr. Carney?
We do need to reform government in the Commonwealth. Right now, there are no campaign finance laws, and basically, if you can write a big enough check, you can have an influence over what happens in our government. We need to develop best practices. These are things we need to make government actually function for the people who are here, as opposed to the people who can afford it or the people who are best connected. The bill that Senator McGarrigle was talking about reducing the size of the House was typical in politics in Harrisburg, where it passed one year, it needed to pass twice in order for it to be effective. But amendments were added to it that effectively changed the bill and killed it. And that's typical of the kinds of things that happen in Harrisburg and the kinds of things we need to get away from.
Thank you. The second question is, do you support establishing a Marcus Shale gas extraction tax? And do you accept campaign contributions from industry companies, their employees, and or pro-Marcellus Shale political action committees, or PACs for short? Mr. Carney?
I absolutely think we should be have an extraction tax on the Marcellus Shale. The fact that we don't now is kind of mind-boggling in a lot of ways. And it has to do with the power of lobbyists over the legislature. We need to tax it. We need to tax it in a way because we can use that money for things like education and things that we've been shortchanging for years in our legislature. 2% is not enough. 4% is not enough. Our liberal friends down in Texas have an extraction tax of 7.5%. This could work in Pennsylvania. I know we hear about the impact fees, but impact fees are different from extraction tax. Impact fees are meant to help the areas that are actually impacted by the drilling. And so those things to be separate. We shouldn't be following that false trail as a way of getting around the fact that we need a tax. Oh, by the way, I do not take any money at all from oil and gas lines.
Mr. McGarrigle?
Well, you already know where I stand on that. I did run on it. I agree we need a shale tax. I agree 2% was too low, but you have to remember one thing in government. It takes 26 votes in the Senate, 102 in the House, and the governor needs to sign it. Next year, I will propose a 4%. I think if you go much higher, you will have a negative effect on the gas industry in Pennsylvania. And we do already collect hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in impact fees. And when it comes to campaign contributions, I get contributions from a lot of people. From the medical field, from the Architects Association, from the auto industry, from insurance companies. And I have taken donations from gas extractors and gas companies, just as the Senate Dems have. The Governor Wolf probably taken about $70–80 million, $70,000 or $80,000 in campaign contributions. the president of the leader of the Democratic Senate caucus has taken tens of thousands of dollars from gas companies. It's, we take money from everyone. That being said,
please be quiet. Thank you.
That being said, at no time when I take a contribution from anyone, does that affect my vote in any way?
Our third question. Given one recommendation in the Pennsylvania Attorney General's recent report on sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, what's your position on modifying provisions relating to the statute of limitations to allow survivors of sexual abuse by priests or others in society at large to make credible complaints regardless of the person's age or the year of the alleged incident that occurred? And Mr. McGarrigle.
I have supported the Attorney General's report. When the Attorney General's report was sent over to the House, it only had 2 of the 4 provisions in it that were from the grand jury investigations that was passed from the House. When it came over to the Senate, we added the other 2, but we didn't add the look back. And for that, and I fought for it. John Rafferty in the Senate, Tommy Tomlinson, all the Southies, we fought to get that put in. We met with the victims. We wanted to vote. And I'll tell you how bad I wanted to vote. My first grandchild was born last Wednesday night. I didn't leave the Pennsylvania Senate because I was fighting with Joe Scarnati to get that vote out and be able to vote on it for the victims. I've always been with the victims. I've met with them in my local offices. I've met with them. The Attorney General knows I'm with the victims. He was in my office, and I am for them 100%.
Mr. Carney?
So the problem is that Senator McGarrigle says he's this now, but when he had the opportunity to stand up in the Senate and actually talk about it before the vote was taken, we didn't hear anything from him at all. This is an issue that never should have gotten this far. We passed through the House in a way with amendments that made it meet what the Attorney General wanted to happen. And it should have been passed. The problem is that leadership in the Senate is skewed around in such a way. They're so controlled by special interests that they can't actually get out of their own way to pass something that everybody agrees with.
Our next question. What is your position on health care funding? Mr. Carney.
Thank you. Healthcare is a huge issue in Pennsylvania right now, and I fully support what the governor has done by executive order in expanding Medicaid in Pennsylvania. That has allowed over 700,000 people to get health insurance who didn't have health insurance before. This is a huge issue for us because we all know that when uninsured people go to a hospital, it winds up costing all of us much more money than it would for them to have insurance. I believe that health care is a right and that everybody in Pennsylvania should be able to get affordable and good health insurance, not necessarily the watered-down versions that the Trump administration is pushing at this point. So I would, in the Senate itself, I would push to actually make the expansion of Medicaid into law so we didn't have to depend only on the governor's signature. And would look at expanding it further so that even more Pennsylvanians could be covered.
Applause, please.
I also agree that every Pennsylvanian deserves good quality health insurance. I voted to expand the CHIPS program so every child in Pennsylvania has the insurance available to them. I've met with the Auditor General on several occasions. We've had hearings all over the state to look at the prescription drug pricing problem, to shine a little more light on it, to try to make prescription drugs more affordable to all Pennsylvanians. But just like my opponent, I agree we should make insurance more affordable. But the last thing I want is government involved in insurance. Because if any of you out there are veterans, just see what we did to the veterans of America. The medical treatment that we receive from our VA hospitals is terrible. So the last thing you want is government in the medical business.
The next question. Please describe your views on Sunoco's proposed highly volatile liquid pipeline project marketed as Mariner East in specific terms of risk to public safety, impacts to property values, and constitutional private property rights. Mr. McGarrigle?
Yeah, I've always supported the pipeline industry. There's a pipeline running through Springfield that's been here for probably 75 years. But number one priority is the health, safety, and welfare of anyone that lives near the pipeline, any property near a pipeline. And since the pipelines have all started, I have introduced bills that for siting. Some of the problems with the Mariner East project is that right-of-way was given about 75 years ago. A lot of things have been built around it. That the proposal that I have is that the siting would have to go before the local townships to make sure it's approved before we just take the right-of-way. But let's be clear on one thing. There's only one person that authorized that pipeline that can stop that pipeline or have his departments do something with it, and that is the governor. And when we had the explosion in western Pennsylvania, I called on his office to do an emergency stop and to review all the safety around those pipelines, and since then, still nothing has happened.
Mr. Carney?
So the problem with the pipeline starts a long time ago. This was a sweetheart deal to allow a for-profit company to essentially was given utility status so that it could bypass local approvals for where the pipeline would actually go. The right-of-ways that it follows are from the 1930s, which were created in order to get home heating fuel from Philadelphia westward into the central part of the state. So a laudatory goal for a government to be doing. I'm not so sure that transportation of highly volatile materials under great pressure is the same sort of thing, especially when it's heading to Marcus Hook to be put on ships and sent across the seas to make plastic with. This material should have been, we deserved a risk assessment that was done and made public before this whole pipeline was approved and before it all pushed through. Now we're at a point where half the pipeline has been constructed, and it's with a lot of delays because of problems that they've had with construction and how that's kind of worked. And we still don't have a public risk assessment that was done by anybody other than the local residents who crowdfunded their own in order to see what the deal is. This stuff is different than a natural gas. It's heavier than air. You can't see it, you can't smell it. If you breathe it, you die. And it's going within 65 feet of an elementary school. This is not something we should be allowed.
Our next question. U.S. News ranks states on a number of categories. Pennsylvania is in the bottom half in education, infrastructure, crime and corrections, fiscal stability, quality of life. U.S. News ranks Pennsylvania 38th overall. The Republican Party has controlled the Senate for 27 years. It hasn't moved Pennsylvania forward. Why should we give you more than 27 years to do something useful? And the first, Mr. Carney.
Well, my hope is that Republicans won't have control of the Senate. But this is a very complex issue. It has a lot of aspects to it. In general, our credit rating is in such a terrible position because of sort of bad decisions that were done with pensions and the pension money was handled. But there's been a systematic reduction in the amount of money that we put towards education and we put towards infrastructure. If you look at the graphs over the last 50 years and see the way real spending has been relative to real cost, it's a crisscross that just shouldn't be there. We now, for example, we spend about 37% of the funding that each student needs to pay for their education comes from the state, where 25 years ago it was 50%. And that's one of the reasons why our property taxes are so high, because under the guise of local control, you're asked to make up the difference between what the Commonwealth is not willing to spend on your kids' education. So what we need to do is get our fiscal house in order. We need to find additional revenue streams that can actually, so we can start supporting the infrastructure projects and supporting the education the way it needs to be done, the way it's actually constitutionally mandated in the Commonwealth.
Mr. McGarrigle.
Thank you. We have spent, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've spent $500 or $600 million more on education. We have expanded the highways with Act 78. We put billions of dollars into infrastructure. We have a long way to go. The pension issue. When I was on Delaware County Council, our pension was 105% funded. When I showed up at the state, we were about 60 or 70 billion dollars in debt. And that had a serious consequence on the local school districts, because no matter what they did, they'd have to raise their taxes. We've made great strides in improving that. This year alone, our tax revenue base was up $800 million. If the economy continues to do well, we will handle that problem. And that pension problem wasn't a Democrat or Republican issue. That started under Governor Ridge, when the pension was, fully funded, doing great. He changed the multiplier. Then comes Governor Rendell, who didn't fund it for 8 years. And then came the crash of '08, where we lost a large portion of our revenue. We're going to work on it to regain it, but to say we haven't increased education funding, we have increased record education funding in Pennsylvania, and Governor Wolf is counting it all the time.
The next question. Would you vote to tax pensions? Mr. McGarrigle?
No, I wouldn't. Senior citizens have worked their whole life. They pay taxes to put that pension away. And to double tax them as they retire and need the money to pay their taxes and their health care and everything else, I think it would be disgraceful to tax pensions in Pennsylvania.
Mr. Carney?
I think there's a few things we agree on, but I think this is one of them.
The next question. Other states have legalized recreational marijuana to support revenue. Do you believe Pennsylvania should? Mr. Carney?
I do believe we should be legalizing recreational marijuana, but I think we need to do it slowly and carefully. One of the advantages we have in Pennsylvania is we already have our liquor store system, which is already set up in a way that it can be transitioned into recreational marijuana as well. But it needs to be done slowly. We're just in the infancy of medical marijuana, and we're really just starting to understand how that works and how it can work. So we should go slowly, but we should be working in that direction.
Mr. McGarrigle?
Thank you. I supported medical marijuana, but not from the beginning. When Senator Fulmer introduced that, I thought it was a bad idea because it's a gateway drug. And to legalize marijuana today, when we have the greatest opioid crisis in America, we're losing thousands and thousands of young people, and to create another drug, a sin tax in Pennsylvania, would be horrible for the residents. Furthermore, the governor of Pennsylvania has already come out and said that he would never support it and never sign such a crazy idea.
Thank you. And just a gentle reminder, being quiet while everybody answers their questions to show respect for both opinions. Certainly.
I think the problem here is that there's a false narrative between the idea of marijuana as a gateway drug. That's been disproved by study after study, and it's an old thing that's been around since Nixon and the war on drugs was around. At this time, we start looking at these things for what they actually are, instead of what we've been led to believe over the course of time.
Okay, our next question. How can we make educational opportunities equitable and also spread the burden of paying for that education in an equitable way? Mr. McGarrigle. I'm trying.
But you'll get it by the end of the night, I'm sure. It took my third grade nun halfway through the year before I could pronounce my name, so I'll give you time. What was the question again?
It has to do with education. How can we make educational opportunities equitable and also spread the burden of paying for that education in an equitable way?
Well, first of all, I have a bill in there now to work on the funding formula. The funding formula in Pennsylvania is so out of whack, and it goes back many, many years. We are paying for students that are not in classrooms in different parts of Pennsylvania, and it is totally out of control. Just to give you an idea how it works, every dollar that leaves my district, the 26th district, and goes to Harrisburg, if you average it out, my school districts get about 17 cents on a dollar. Senator Hutchinson from Western Pennsylvania, every dollar from his district, he gets about 78 cents on a dollar. So you can see the difference. So when we had this argument in Harrisburg, and this argument is not a Republican-Democrat argument, this is what part of the state you're from. And if somebody is funding your schools to 78%, and we're getting 17, it's not an easy fix. We have started the new funding formula with new money. We need to, my bill will take all the money, bring it through the new funding formula, and at least get it where it's fair for all Pennsylvanians. Because right now in the Southeast, 42% of all the taxes that are collected in Pennsylvania come from 5 counties. There are 67 counties. So we are paying our fair share of all the bills in Pennsylvania, and I fully support and have a bill out there to change the funding formula in Pennsylvania.
Mr. Carney?
It is true that we do have a fair funding formula that currently, right now, only 7% of the money that the state puts into education goes through. My understanding of Senator McGarrigle's bill is that it would say that half the money would go through that. I think that's a step in the right direction, but literally all the money needs to go through it. But that's even only half of the issue. The real issue is that we need to up the amount of money that's actually going into the formula even further to get it back to a point where we're literally distributing the money fairly across. Senator's absolutely right that Southeast Pennsylvania takes it on the head on this all the time because our populations keep growing, our school districts keep getting larger, we have more need. Upper Darby School District has been trying to build a middle school for almost 10 years now. And they can't because of the way that the structure is set up. And people from the central part of the state and the western part of the state where populations are being reduced complain that it would be unfair for them to receive less money than they received the year before. But I don't understand how that fairness, they can't flip that around. Because if their need is less, they should be getting less. And if our need keeps increasing, our need needs to be met as well. We are literally at the bottom of the country. We are number 50 in terms of how we equitably fund our school districts between rich districts and poor districts. My kids had a great education in the Wallingford-Swarthmore School District. It's unconscionable that only 4 miles away they have the trouble that they have in Upper Darby, in Chester Upland, or in the William Penn, where they literally have to sue the state to try to get the fair funding.
The next question. What are the candidates' views of negative campaigning? Do they support efforts to smear entire communities or professions as a way of dividing the community? Mr. Carney?
Running for office is a difficult thing, and as a candidate, you're always constantly poised with decisions about which way to go, what direction to go, how to sort of push your message out, what you want your message to be. I'm running not as a political person. I'm an architect who's decided to try to act politically. So my thinking is probably maybe different than some other candidates in terms of how we want to push our message out. I think at this point in time, I think we can understand that smear campaigns and irrational, fear-based ads don't really work. I think the ads that my opponent has run against me are pretty awful. I mean, some of them are kind of almost funny because they're so outrageous and so ludicrous. I will thank him for increasing, getting my name out there. How it works. But at some point we're going to make a decision where this kind of campaigning doesn't really work. In this case, I don't think it will because, again, the claims that were made against me, some of them are racially biased and just kind of awful stuff. I'm going to be proud of the campaign that I'm doing.
Many of you don't see his Twitter or his Facebook posts, but when he calls me a racist or a country club Republican or millionaire McGarrigle, you have to punch back. The only reason he's not punching me with the mail is he probably just doesn't have campaign money to do it. But the fact is, Tim Kearney is from the most liberal town in Delaware County. He has very liberal views that I really don't believe are the views of all the residents, Republican or Democrat, in the 26th district.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not.
Respect.
Quiet, please.
You heard him tonight. He wants to legalize marijuana. The worst.
I asked the audience to please.
Evidently, a lot of you in here were not on the Delaware County Heroin Task Force. Worked with people in the Springfield Cares Coalition that had serious drug problems. The last thing you want to do is create another drug that's available to people legally and have them smoking pot and driving around. I guess that's what he wants. But if I have to call him a liberal radical, I have no problem doing it.
It's necessary to maintain decorum in the room. It is respectful for both of the candidates to do so. Thank you. The next question. What do you think should be done to address the problem of the gerrymandering of the state legislature and congressional districts in Pennsylvania? Mr. McGarrigle.
I think we need to form an independent commission of citizens. The politicians tried it, and we gerrymandered the 7th district, but we didn't do it quite as well as the judges that the Supreme Court did. So maybe we'll try these citizens to do it. That 7th congressional district went from a +3 Republican to a +14 Democratic district by a Democratic Supreme Court. So the last thing you want to do is have the judges do it, because evidently they can't make them fair either. So I would support private citizens getting together and pick randomly, just like jury duty. And you go up there and you pick the districts. Fair. They're not fair now. A +14 district is horrible. There's no way in the world that Delaware County should be represented by someone that's also representing Southwest Philly and South Philadelphia. We have different values, we have different ideas. It's a bad district. I would also move a little bit further. I think our judicial seats should be by district. Because right now, any of our state judges or Supreme Court judges that get there are from 2 parts of the state, Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. And that's only because big money gets them there. So if we had it spread out evenly, the court system would be more fair for all of Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania would be represented much better in the court system in Pennsylvania.
Mr. Carney?
I fully support the idea of a citizens group redistricting where we have to get rid of gerrymandering. What Senator said is true, that the new 5th is more Democratic than the gerrymandered 7th was. But look what the 7th did in order to try to make sure that it was still a Republican control. The fact that the new one, at least geographically, is contiguous is kind of a wonderful thing. I do think that this is a place where politics as usual really came into effect in Harrisburg. The Fair Districts people were pushing this for over 2 years, a citizens commission to redraw the map. And they had great ways of actually doing it, involving the computer programs that are out there, the things that allowed the very gerrymandered states to be done could be done with different criteria to become fair and even. And that's what we need to do. But what happened in Harrisburg was that the Fair Districts people were led down the garden path until the very last possible second, when the bill was completely changed and gutted and amendments were added into, such as the one the Senator is talking about trying to redo the way that we actually pick our Supreme Court justices, by district instead of by popular vote. I disagree with that. I don't think, I understand what he's saying about it, but I think it's crazy to try to say that we're going to pick judges for the highest court in the state through districts.
Question number 12. What groups and/or industries and organizations are major contributors to your campaign? Mr. Carney?
Major groups that are probably Senate Democrats are probably the biggest campaign donor that we have. The Architects PAC has donated some money to us, but their architects don't have a whole lot of money, so they're not a great source of campaigns. But the majority of our funding comes from private citizens, mostly in the district. We don't have very many PACs who are giving to us. As you know, the issues with labor are very interesting in Delaware County in terms of who they support and how they support them. We do have money from the American Federation of Teachers and the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, which is great. And John Kane, who ran for this seat 4 years ago, has been a supporter with the diplomacy.
I think I told you earlier, I get contributions from all different PACs, all different individuals, private individuals from every business or every industry in Pennsylvania. And it's my opponent.
Come on.
There's no photography allowed in the, except for the professional.
This camera is
Maybe on.
Can record the whole time? Can you delete it?
It's not on.
Delete it before you get back to it.
So you're just going to hand it to him. That's good. It's that right here. Yeah, too.
That was smart.
It's very smart. Just
Thank you. Like I said, I receive contributions from different PACs, different business people throughout Delaware County, Pennsylvania, that respect my opinions, respect just the way that I've governed. And as my opponent said, I could run through the list of the contributions that I've received, and he really received the same, because if he received money from any of the Senate Dems, they're at the same fundraisers as me, just different hotel rooms in Harrisburg. And the one thing that he's getting that I'm not getting, he's getting a lot of dark money. There's a lot of money that's been put into Pennsylvania from Eric Holden and President Obama to change the demographics of Pennsylvania, to change the state.
Excuse me, can we wait just a moment, please?
And the one thing
And I'm
about...
going to ask that the doors be closed.
Oh, real no.
I'm just saying that, I'm only saying that so that, because there's some noise in the other room we're not able to hear.
It's stuffy enough in here.
Okay. I'll ask the people in the lobby to please be quiet. Okay? And I apologize for the interruption.
No problem. Any contributions that were ever made to me are on my campaign finance report. It tells you who gave it to me and how much. But the dark money that's been in this race, nobody knows where it came from. And there's organizations out there that are doing mailing that he doesn't know about, but they're coming into our district, and nobody has to say where that money came from. And that needs to change in Pennsylvania also.
Our next question. What is your position on equal pay for equal work? Women currently receive considerably less than men for exactly the same work. For white women, that figure is 79% what men earn, and for women of color, it's even less. McGarrigle.
I believe every woman should get paid the exact amount as a man if she has the same qualifications. I don't believe a woman should get paid less for any career. I was raised by a single mother who raised four daughters. They all became professionals and became very successful. I believe that every woman deserves the same pay if they're just as qualified as a man.
Mr. Carney.
Well, that's interesting to hear, Senator McGarrigle, since you introduced the bill last year into the Senate, which essentially would deny Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. We actually called it the Fair Wage Act, which was interesting. But would actually deny them from trying to enact laws which could close that wage gap, the preemption aspect of it. This is an area that I care deeply about. Women's issues, it's unconscionable that even now in 2018, that women get paid less for the same work that men do. And it's, as you said in your question, it's even worse for women of color. And this is something that I would work tirelessly on in the Senate to try to make amends for.
Question number 15.
The bill that I introduced in the Senate was approved by the Obama administration. It was a law he put into effect. And the law he's talking about in Philadelphia was overturned in the Supreme Court because it was unconstitutional. We followed the Obama administration word for word when we wrote that bill. And Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, when they opposed it, they lost in the Supreme Court.
All right. Question number 14. What is the best way to address the gang violence that has spilled into Springfield from the Chester areas? Mr. Carney?
Wow. I guess I wasn't aware of the gang violence that is spilled into Springfield from Chester. I mean, they would have to come through Swarthmore and we certainly haven't seen that in Swarthmore. As mayor, the public safety officer, and I work closely with the police department on all these sorts of issues. I think that the biggest problem that, gang violence, if it is coming into Springfield, it's part of a bigger question. What's causing it? What's the root cause of it to begin with in the first place? And I think it has to do with mostly with lack of opportunities for people in Chester, a dwindling middle class, more desperation. These are things that we can, as a caring government, we can actually address and try to make better.
Mr. McGarrigle?
Thank you. Last year, I was able to bring $500,000 to the Delaware County District Attorney's Office to combat this problem in the city of Chester. This was thugs from Chester. Fight could have happened in Swarthmore. Fight could have happened in Ridley. It's a shame it happened in Springfield. But we need to address that problem with stricter gun laws. We need to address that problem with individuals that are arrested with guns, put away for 5, 10, 20 years. The individuals we're talking about in this shooting, they fired into the parking lot, could have killed any innocent person. They should be charged with attempted murder for every single bullet that came out of that gun, 1 count of attempted murder, and put them away forever. There's no reason why we should tolerate that type of violence in Delaware County at all.
No applause, please. All right. Question number 15. There appears to be an ethics issue in Harrisburg. What do you think could be done to improve the transparency and accountability? Mr. McGarrigle.
There is a perception of an ethics issue in Harrisburg, and I think that probably lobbyists need to be more accountable, be more open, and with their who they represent, who they give money to, and I would fully support any type of bill that would bring that to light to show where the money's coming from and what the person that's distributing the money is trying to accomplish. I would have no problem with that at all.
Mr. Carney?
I think this is a big issue in Pennsylvania. The fact that there are no regulations at all for campaign contributions, for example, and that there are no regulations about gifts. As long as they're reported, anybody can give anybody in the legislature any amount of money. The Democrat who's in court right now because she took $2,000, she's in trouble because she didn't report it, not because she took the money. To me, that's crazy. That's if we're citizens trying to act in our government, there's no need for those sorts of free-for-all for money. We need strict campaign finance restrictions. We need rules on lobbyists. We need a gift ban such as the one that the governor has for his staff. We should bring that over into the legislature as well.
The next question. How do you feel about private versus publicly run jails and why? Mr. Carney?
Delaware County is the home of the only privately funded prison in the privately run prison in the county. I personally think it's a travesty. The goals and aims of a for-profit company are different than the goals and aims of the government when it comes to prison. It's very difficult to enact prison reform when the county has to pay a premium if the beds aren't filled in the prison. I've visited the prison before. It seems like the majority of people who are there are people who have trouble making cash bail. All these things are kind of tied together and need to be reformed. We need to reform the way that the system works in terms of cash bail, and we need to get out of the. We shouldn't be funding a for-profit company and running the only prison in Delaware County.
Mr. McGarrigle.
The private prison out there was established for a lot of different reasons. One, it was much cheaper to build when they built that prison many years ago. But the county is not held liable for any lawsuits. That comes under the prison operator. So any of the lawsuits, the county saves millions and millions of dollars because they're defended by the operator of that prison. Should it be private? Should it be public? I don't know. I think we should probably do a study and see which is best. But to say that a private-run company can't do it better than the government, I wouldn't always agree with that either. I mean, there's a lot of things that the private industry does much better than the government. But I would be willing to or suggest to the county that they go out and hire someone to analyze that and see which is the best, which is the most cost-effective. And at the same time, are the prisoners being treated? Are they getting the treatment they need? And I agree with you that there's too many prisoners that are laying around there. We need to expedite. That's not the prison's problem. That's an overburdened court problem that we have. We need to get prisoners, criminals, moving through the criminal justice system quicker. If they can't make bail and they're in there for a nonviolent crime, we need to address that quicker and not keep them in George Hill Correctional Facility. But to blame a lot of the problems on the prison, they're just not simply the prison. It's an overworked court system, and the fact that there's so many drug-related crimes because of the opioid problem we have in Delaware County. Probably 50% of the people that are in George Hill are in there for some type of drug problem.
The next question. How do you plan on helping disabled veterans and others on the disability list re-enter the workforce and take part in our community's economic growth? Mr. McGarrigle.
Okay, some of the things that we've done in Delaware County, first of all, we established a Veterans Court when I was on Delaware County Council. If a veteran got himself into trouble, we fast-tracked them through the court system to get them back on the right track. I think we deserve our veterans deserve everything we can give them. I think we need to work with the Workforce Investment Board that we have in Delaware County to look for jobs for the veterans. I think there should be training programs to cross-train them as they come out of the military, to train them from duties that are similar to the ones that were in the military. Unfortunately, if you were fixing a helicopter in the military, there's not too many helicopters to fix out here, so you need to transition your skills into jobs that are out there. But I will say this, Pennsylvania is going to have such a shortage of skilled labor in the next 10 years, so I'm sure that if we can come up with the right program to cross-train these veterans, to get them on the work back in the workforce, there's going to be plenty of jobs for skilled labor jobs in Pennsylvania.
Mr. Carney.
There are actually two helicopter companies in Delaware County. Yeah. I think the question was about disabled veterans more than veterans who are coming out and needing cross-training. And the disabled veterans issues is really just a question of funding. It's literally political will to fund the programs that we have already to help veterans who are disabled. And disabled veterans they look just like you and me, but they have post-traumatic stress syndrome, or they have things like that really kind of affect them in certain ways. And we just need to make sure that those programs have the caseworkers they need, they have the counselors they need, and they have the facilities that they need for veterans to be integral parts of our society.
Okay, I think we're coming up on our last question so that we have the full hour. Pennsylvania has a high population of elderly folks and the percentage of population, Pennsylvania has a high population of elderly folks as a percentage of the population. What will you do for seniors who can't drive to age in place and afford long-term and dementia care? Mr. Carney.
One of the first things I did when I became mayor of Swarthmore was put together an aging in place task force, because I understood that our community was made up of a variety of people, and the community was strongest when that variety was wide, including aging parents. We were losing people every year because of situations with taxes, with having a house that was too big, there are services they couldn't find. So this group spent a year looking at all the services that were out there, trying to decide how the best ways that we could work for having people age in place. We provided design services, for example, for people's houses to make them safer for them to age in, and things like that. The result of this was that we were surprised that there were actually a lot of programs out there for seniors that seniors just didn't know about. And that was the biggest thing that we found in dealing with the constituency of seniors in our community, was that we just needed to be able to point them to where the services actually existed and help them arrange for rides, et cetera, for those things to work. It's a big problem in the Commonwealth, and that we're all living longer. We're all home health care is an expensive thing, and it's not very well regulated, and it's something we really do need to deal with.
Mr. McGarrigle.
Thank you. When I was on Delaware County Council, I oversaw COSA, the County Office of the Services for the Aging, and any service that a senior could possibly need, whether it be transportation, help to and from doctors, assistance with filling out any type of form, our COSA office does an unbelievable job servicing the seniors. We have many, many senior centers throughout Delaware County, and there's always services available. We have a transportation service for senior citizens to get them to and from their medical appointments or a doctor or the hospital. But I agree with the mayor on this. We do have a very aging population in Pennsylvania, and as they age, we need to come up with solutions to help them more and more. The one bill that I'm working with Senator Tomlinson from Bucks County is at the age 65 to free school taxes on seniors. So, whatever you're paying at age 65, it stays here, no matter how old you get. This will help them, financially. But, I do agree there's a lot we are aging faster and faster in Pennsylvania, and we need to do all we can to protect our senior citizens here in Pennsylvania.
All right, and now for closing statements. Mr. McGarrigle.
First of all, thank you again for hosting this event. This has been a pleasure. Thank you all of you on both sides for coming out and listening to both of us, and I hope you found it informational. Pennsylvania is a very unique state, and people come from a lot of different places to go to Harrisburg, and some of the biggest fights you have up there are not with the Democrats. When people say to me, how is it? I said, I get along better with the Philadelphia Democrats than probably most of the conservative Republicans. Because why? Because we share the same problems. We're from southeastern Pennsylvania. We have transportation issues with SEPTA. We have infrastructure problems. We have all the people in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania living down here. So we have the biggest problems. I've worked on many bills and have been supported by so many organizations, labor unions, that are doing so well in Pennsylvania now for a lot of reasons. Why? This is a great state to work. There's so many opportunities out here, and we need to continue to work and make Pennsylvania an easier place to do business, because right now in the DEP, if you were a builder and were looking for a permit to be approved, it could take up to 10 to 12 weeks to get it approved. No one in the small business can wait 10 to 12 weeks for a bureaucrat to do their job. We need to streamline services, and if our fire department can't do it, we need to outsource those services to private engineering firms or architecture firms like my opponent here that are qualified to do it. But we need to do all we can to move Pennsylvania forward. Thank you very much.
Mr. Carney.
Thanks for the work, Tom. First of all, thank you everybody for coming out tonight and for literally engaging in a civics lesson here at Springfield. And thank you to Tom McGarrigle for doing this and for being much nicer in person than he appears in his But this election really isn't about Tom or about me. It's really about Harrisburg and how Harrisburg is going to function. I don't think it's any secret that most people that I've talked to across our district don't think that Harrisburg is working. I think there are problems with the way it actually happens. And a lot of that comes down to leadership. We saw that Senator Carney held up for his own personal reasons, held up passage of this one bill that we discussed earlier about reparations and lifting the 2-year statute of limitations. Mr. McGarrigle is part of that caucus, so he supports that leader. We need to change the dynamics in Harrisburg. Right now, the Senate is 64 to 16, 34 to 16 in majority. This is in a state that actually has more Democrats than it does Republicans. We need to change that dynamic within the Senate in order to try to get anything done. Right now, the Republicans don't need Democrats to do anything. We need to change the numbers and the proportions so that more cross-fertilization can occur.